get started so we can make the best use of our time. We are very excited today to have Brian Ettling with us. Brian's actually been here the last couple of weeks, but he's officially here today because he's going to be leading us today. Brian is a park ranger at Crater Lake National Park in Oregon, but he's from St. Louis. He is a St. Louis fella, and so he's going to talk to us today about how the issues we've begun to learn about in terms of climate change and so forth are experienced through his work and what we can learn about what's going on in the national park system that might help us learn even more about climate change and what we can do. So Brian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Pastor John. It's so wonderful. Thank you, guys. It's so wonderful to be with you guys here today. Let me just grab my remote. And as Pastor John said, I'm actually a seasonal park ranger with the National Park Service, but I put the title in parentheses, Climate Change in Our National Park Ranger Brian Ettling, because I'm not speaking on behalf of the National Park Service. I'm speaking as a private citizen, a very important distinction there. So I'll be sharing what I've learned as a park ranger, but by no means am I sharing the view necessarily of the National Park Service. I had to make sure that's in the beginning since this will be taped here today. So, how many folks were here for last week's talk from Benjamin DeFoy? Didn't he do a wonderful job on the Beatitudes of climate change? I've seen that twice now, and I've learned so much about that. So we're just continuing this program that we're giving to about the importance of faith and acting on climate change. And then next week, to put a plug in for next week, Larry Lazar, who's in the back row right there, he's going to be speaking about his life's journey. And I've seen his program numerous times, but I love it. His program, and I'm going to do my best to be here next week too, his program From Doubtful to Alarmed, how he's kind of transformed his views on climate change during the course of his life. Now Larry actually lives in Eureka today, and he's a businessman in West County, but he actually was born and raised in Michigan. And the difference between Larry and myself is I'm actually from St. Louis, but I'm actually from a different part of St. Louis. It's kind of washed out on the screen. I'm from way the other end of St. Louis, South County, way on the other side there. I don't know about you guys, but I don't really come up. It is such a drive to get up here. Coming from South County, that for me, as a kid, I always thought when you made it up this far that I'm only like a couple miles from like Minnesota or the North Pole. It's just outside. Maybe you guys feel the same when you go to South County. You probably feel like you're a few miles from Memphis or New Orleans, because it's kind of that outside reference here today. And what's even interesting here too is that my fiance is towards the back. My fiance is Tanya, is here. You know, speaking of different worlds, we're going to see if we can make this work, but we're from totally different worlds. She's from West County and I'm from South County. So hopefully we can make this work here. So I grew up here in St. Louis, and I'm in front of you because of my St. Louis education. I went to a great public school in South County called Oakville. I'm a 1987 graduate of Oakville High School. This is a picture of me taken in high school. And so when I wasn't in high school or studying, I loved being in the parks. And there's a park in South County that I love going to called Bee Tree Park. Bee Tree Park is where basically towards the confluence of the Merrimack and the Mississippi River. And I just loved going there and hiking in the woods and just admiring the Mississippi River. My clicker is not. There you go. So the Mississippi River, and I loved looking at it year-round, because the one thing I love about St. Louis is the four seasons. I got to spend 16 years living in Florida, and it was basically hot all year round. So I love the four seasons. I missed it when it was great to be 80 degrees in January in Miami, but I love the change in seasons from this. Let me see if this will work here. I guess it won't work. To this here today. So what it starts to look like this time of year. And when I'm hiking in the woods, I love this quote by Anne Frank. It's on the next slide here. Anne Frank once said that, "Who's ever lonely, afraid, or unhappy should spend time alone with the nature, heavens, and God. Because only then is life as it should be, among the simple beauty of nature." So from that, growing up here in St. Louis and spending time in our local parks here, it led me to working to this place. Crater Lake National Park in Southern Oregon. So I've been working out there off and on for 23 years as a park ranger. And that's a picture of me taken in November of 1992, 23 years ago. I haven't changed a bit, have I? Actually, I think I've gotten better looking over the years as a park ranger.
You need to have that.
Hey, I got hair. Yeah. That first picture, yes. So what's neat about Crater Lake is it's the deepest lake in the United States. It is almost 2,000 feet deep. Crater Lake is so deep, let's see if I can put it, you can stack 3 gateway arches on top of each other. And you have about 63 feet of water above that top arch. And also the water is so clear that what I do during my boat tour is I scuba the water and drink the water from the lake itself. And it is delicious water. And as far as I can tell, there's no side effects when drinking the Crater Lake water. So it is delicious. Talk about God's beauty. Then from the next slide there. So what I like to do in my spare time then, obviously when I'm not, and it's great to talk about with park visitors, but man, what I do is I do take those busmans, what's called busman's holidays. So when I'm not working, I'm out on top of these mountain peaks just enjoying that incredible beauty there too. And I wanted to maybe think of the psalm verse that I heard that was used in the service this morning. The beginning of Psalm 24 that says, "The earth is the Lord in all of its fullness." So when I'm out in nature, you can see really what a fantastic creation that we're living among. They're here today. So one of the good things I can do as a park ranger is guide sunset guided hikes. So it's beautiful there during the day, but it's really beautiful at dawn and dusk, seeing the sun go behind the mountains. One of my favorite stories is by, anybody ever heard of him before? Tony Campolo, minister? Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tony Campolo, sociologist of Eastern College in Pennsylvania. Fantastic books about what it means to live as a Christian. And he tells this story that he speaks all across the United States. He was being picked up somewhere, and when he was being driven to his speaking conference, he saw a beautiful sunset, something like this. And he said, "Jesus, that's beautiful." And the minister in the car said, "You know, I would really appreciate it if people don't cuss in my car." And Tony Campolo says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't talking to you." He wasn't trying to put the minister down, but he was just trying to honor our Creator and beautiful creation here. And I kind of feel the same way when I'm out there too. It's just to give glory to it here today. So this is a picture taken in May. This is typically what I see out in May out there. So those of you who are tired of winter, you probably don't want to come visit me in May. But I typically see it snow up until about Father's Day at Crater Lake. But seeing some changes, but before I get into that, that's Wizard Island. Wizard Island, we do boat tours out there. I narrate the boat tours. Wizard Island is 760 feet tall, 130 feet taller than the arch. And there's a crater at the top as big as a football, about 360 feet across and 90 feet deep. And in most years it has enough snow in it. The rangers really like to go snow sledding inside that crater. So I've got a video of that I'm going to show real fast. Yeah, hit one more button there. Let's see if it'll go. Here we go. Here, that's going to be me sledding down inside the crater of Wizard Island.
Oh my God. Yay! Smile, Brian, for the video.
Of course I had to have my cardinal shirt on, didn't I? Oh, that's okay. Another amazing part about Crater Lake is the stars at night. Very little light pollution or air pollution, so you can really see the Milky Way and the stars. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if I can share that with you guys here today. This is what Dr. King once said, "Something should remind us once more about the great things of the universe that we never see. You walk out at night and look up at the beautiful stars as they bedeck the heavens, like swinging lamps of eternity, and you think you can see all. Oh no, you never see the laws of gravitation that holds them up there." So living in this incredible beauty, I'm really excited about returning out there. I start working in about May 18th. But working out there, though, I am seeing some subtle changes there. which we're going to get to in a moment. But I also forgot, I want to mention the other national park I worked. So I've worked 21 years at Crater Lake, or actually 23 years starting this May. And besides there, I also worked at Everglades National Park in South Florida. I got to lead canoe trips in the Everglades as a park ranger, and while canoeing, I got to see beautiful creatures out there. You might not think I'm beautiful, but the endangered American crocodiles, about 400 of these guys left. Very shy. One of my most profound experiences in nature is one time I accidentally canoed too close to one, and then just that fast he was in the water. It's amazing how fast they can move when they want to. And you really start to respect them after a while because they really want nothing to do with people. They're very, very shy. And when you get to see them swimming, they're like a U-boat or something, like a submarine. They barely stick above the surface, only that fourth tooth. And very stealth in there. And it's really cute to see the young ones going around in the water there too. And when I was in the Everglades, speaking of the beautiful creation, I got to canoe to a place called Snakebite. Bite spelled B-I-G-H-T means a bay within a bay. Not they're going to be bitten by a snake out there. But I got to see the wild flamingos out there. And Florida Bay, it's averaging about 4 feet of water. So if you tip over in Florida Bay, you typically just stand up. A lot of times the water is like 2 to 4 feet. So the flamingos, I got to canoe around them, a group of 40 of them. And then I got to see some of them take off when you accidentally do get too close to them. It's about a 6-foot wingspan, so just beautiful birds. So it's just amazing to be out in that creation. But when I was working in the Everglades, though, got to see this beautiful bird, roseate spoonbill. They stick their bill halfway in the water to get shrimp, and they make this great sound. I love the way they talk there. But while working down there in the Everglades, people started asking me about this global warming thing. I knew nothing about it, so I had to kind of bring myself up to speed because people expect park rangers to know everything, don't you? Everyone always nods yes, so I had to learn what I could about it. And I kind of stumbled across something talking to friends and reading books that in the 20th century, the sea level rose in South Florida by 8 inches. And that's 4 times more than it had risen in previous centuries, only about 2 inches. And this century with rising temperatures with Greenland and Antarctica, many scientists now think we could have a 3-foot rise in sea level, which means we could lose that beautiful habitat for the alligators, crocodiles, dolphins, manatees, animals like this. That had me very concerned. That's why I do presentations here in the winter on climate change in St. Louis rather than being in Florida. Does that sound crazy? I think most people would rather be in Florida in the winter than St. Louis. So, Everglades National Park, I don't know how you can see it, but that lime green section is only about a couple feet above sea level. So we have a good chance we might lose a good portion of this park, if not most of this park in the 20th century with sea level, and this has me very concerned. The highest point on the park road is about 3 feet above sea level. So very low. So I'm very concerned about possibly losing the Everglades. And so besides Everglades National Park, Crater Lake, I'm seeing subtle changes with climate change. In 2012, there was about 5 to 6 feet of snow on there, but that was kind of a typical winter. But when I went back last year, in May, there was about 3 to 4 feet of snow on the ground. I thought I was in the wrong month there. I thought I was a month late or something, how little snow there was. I was shocked at how little snow there was. And when you see these images side by side, it may not look like much to you, but I'm noticing subtle changes there. I'm noticing it's raining more there in May, in June, in September and October, and snowing less. Our snowpack is going down. And we've actually graphed this out. In the 1930s, we had about 614 inches of snow. We actually like to say at Crater Lake we had about 520 inches of snow or 44 feet. But we've been noticing by decade it's been going down. It's been steadily going down. 2013, we had about 354 inches of snow, and it was panic in the park. It's, oh, we had to have all these water restrictions. You couldn't wash your car. They were telling us to take shorter showers and all that. 2014, we even had less snow than that. This past winter, we didn't even break 200 inches of snow. So this trend, and the trend is actually showing, it's been graphed out that our snowpack has been going down at Crater Lake. So I'm very concerned about this. And so, but yeah, that's Crater Lake. What about us in St. Louis? What does that have to do for us in St. Louis? So, think of a Western state for me here. Think of a Western state here for me. California, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Arizona, Nevada. Western states get up to 75% of their water from snowpack. So less snowpack in the mountains, it is a big deal. And it is a big deal for us for this reason. Who here likes to eat fresh fruit? Up to 75% of our fresh fruit comes from western states, such as California, and Oregon, and Washington, places like that. So less snowpack in the mountains does have an impact on what we pay in the grocery store, what the food that's available in the grocery store. And the statistics from 10 years ago, but spring snowpack in the United States has declined by 60%. And it'd be interesting if I got the updated figure how much more than that. So this is how it impacts us. So what about us in St. Louis? Again, that snowpack, yeah, it might impact us in the grocery store, but what's the big concern here in St. Louis? Well, 2 years ago, I was driving to meet a friend in the Hill in South St. Louis, and I stumbled across this. This was October 24th of 2012. I like at the end, it almost sounds like somebody going shh after all that fireworks, isn't it? But what I thought this was somebody's birthday party. I mean, a pretty elaborate birthday party. I thought it was somebody's birthday party. When I found out this was a 4th of July fireworks, they couldn't hold that summer because it was too dry. My dad loves to barbecue. He could not barbecue that summer because it was just too dry, and people were really worried about the chance of fire happening. Who remembers that drought in 2012? I was in Oregon, but I kept hearing stories how trees are being lost in Forest Park and Tower Grove and areas like that. So when I came back in November, though, this was what scared me, is that the drought threatened to close the Mississippi River. One of the things that helps us have a lower kind of, helps our cost lower here in St. Louis. We've got that nice river that provides goods and services up here. Well, that Mississippi almost got shut down to barge traffic because that drought was so bad there. And that was actually, 2012 was the same year as Hurricane Sandy. And so the drought and Hurricane Sandy cost the U.S. economy about $100 billion. Hurricane Sandy was about $65 billion. Now climate change did not cause Hurricane Sandy. Let's be very clear about that. It did not cause Hurricane Sandy. What climate change does, it puts our weather on steroids. So what happened is that the ocean temperatures were extra warm, so that's extra jet fuel for Hurricane Sandy, make it worse. Also, as we're losing ice up in the Arctic, it's causing the jet stream to be more wavy. And that also helped push Hurricane Sandy right into New York and New Jersey. Plus, the sea level in New York City had risen 14 inches because more melting in Antarctica and Greenland. And so when you have higher sea levels, that means more houses got inundated with water there. So that was the one extreme, and the other extreme was us. And we were right smack dab in the middle of this drought in 2012 that cost us $35 billion in damage. And crop losses and other damages going on. So we've seen a little bit of that already here with climate change. And for us in St. Louis, and this is one of the reasons why I haven't spent a summer here in 23 years, is heat waves. Heat waves are a big concern. I don't like the summer. I would rather deal with snow, believe it or not, at the end of June than the hot weather here. But heat waves are a big concern for us because, well, as scientists will tell you, heat waves have actually tripled in the last 50 years in the United States. So it is getting a little bit hotter. And keep in mind what climate scientists will tell you is that heat waves are the greatest weather killer in the United States. Each year it kills more people than floods, hurricanes, blizzards, and lightning combined. So it's a big concern about hotter weather with more climate change causing more heat waves. This is an interesting graph put together by 2009 by the Union of Concerned Scientists. The red, if we don't do anything to reduce climate change, we could be seeing a lot more days of 100 degrees. But if we do what we can to reduce our emissions, the more tan graph shows we can actually more limit the increasing number of days of hot weather with this. So the next slide. So what is global climate change? We hear that term thrown a lot these days. And basically what scientists are worried about is we turn on our cars and burn gasoline, and also when we use coal and natural gas and oil for electricity, the byproduct is carbon dioxide, which is warming up the planet. Now, carbon dioxide itself is good. It's a greenhouse gas among water vapor, nitrous oxide, methane, and other gases. What it does is it traps the Earth's heat, makes the average temperature of the planet about 60 degrees. If we didn't have these greenhouse gases, it would be an ice ball. None of us would be able to live here. So what the greenhouse gas does, it makes Earth the ideal home as opposed to like Venus or Mars or anywhere else. And this idea of greenhouse gases, this is not a new idea. John Tyndall, first, oops, I'll keep it up there just a little bit longer there, but I really appreciate your help here since my remote does not.
I think I'm messing it up here.
Oops.
There we go.
So John Tyndall, we'll talk much about John Tyndall here in a moment. He was the first person to really put together establish the science that carbon dioxide, he's shown light through a tube, actually traps heat. And so he put together the idea of the greenhouse gases here. So this is actually not a new idea. This is a very old idea there. And so what's happening is that since 1880 with the Industrial Revolution, we've increased the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere by 40%. It's as if we put more blankets over our planet. And as a result, the average temperature of the planet has gone up about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 0.8 degrees Celsius, about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's over about 130 years or so. Now, that sounds laughable, doesn't it, living here in St. Louis? Because the temperature here can average about, it can vary about 20 to 40 degrees in a day, about 1.5 degrees. That sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But what's our body temperature? 98.6. What happens when you add 1.5 degrees to that? You have a fever, and you're seriously thinking about staying home from work, or school, or not going to church. So 1.5 degrees makes a big difference in our own body temperature, and also makes a difference in the planet. The planet knows a difference with an average of 1.5 degrees there too. Now I've got a video to show you. This is put together by NASA. This shows you the changes in global temperatures from 1884 to today. What NASA did is they compiled all the weather data. Really, weather temperatures were taken in earnest by sailors and from cities across the world since 1884. And this will show you the changes here. You can go ahead and hit the next button here. So the blue will be 2 degrees below normal. Yellow is a couple degrees above normal. And naturally, the Earth will vary. One part might be hotter, another part maybe colder. 1911 was last year really below normal, and you're going to start noticing we get above after 1980, the whole planet is actually warming up uniformly here. But especially up in the poles. And the next slide will show you the change from 1884 to basically today. This big change. I heard one comedian say it almost looks like the Earth is blushing today, doesn't it? So we're seeing it. NASA can see on the satellites how we're trapping more heat in our atmosphere. And we've got many indicators of climate change. There's lots of evidence. There's multiple lines of evidence showing that climate change is happening. At Crater Lake, for instance, I showed you before, we're seeing that the snow cover is going down there. Also in the Everglades, we're seeing a rise in sea level. But there's multiple lines of evidence that shows us that climate change is happening. Now, for the next slide, how do we know it's us? As another ranger asked me, how do we know that we are guilty of adding carbon dioxide? Well, it really has to come down to this. A banana and a piece of coal. This is really, if you can keep this in mind, this is kind of the aha moment for me with climate change here. This is a piece of West Virginia coal. And this is a banana. What do these have in common? Anybody? Carbon. And they're both different forms of energy. But they're both forms of energy we use for our lives here. This is my coffee in the morning. That's the first thing I look for. If you ever want to make me grumpy, deny me a banana in the morning. I love bananas in the morning. So this is energy. Don't recommend eating this for breakfast. Not that I've tried it though. But we get about 80% of our energy here in St. Louis from coal. passes. This is really cool to see up close. This was a tree over 200 million years ago. So what they do have in common, though, is, as you mentioned in the audience, is these are both different forms of carbon. Now, what's interesting, though, is that this banana has something that that piece of coal does not. What happens is that when rays are coming in from outside the planet, what they do is 80% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. And some of these cosmic rays come in, and they smack some of these nitrogen atoms. And they become an unstable atom, what's known as carbon-14, which is a type of carbon. But carbon-14, what happens is it gets absorbed by trees, by us, and by bananas. And it only makes about 1.1% of our carbon, but it's very important. You'll see right there. Yeah, it gets absorbed by bananas, it gets absorbed by us. And what happens is that you can date things based upon their carbon-14. Carbon-14 is very unstable, only around about 30,000 years. So for instance, if you go to the Holy Land and you start to do some archaeology, and if you want to determine if a site is from like the time of Jesus or the time of David, you would count the carbon-14 and it would tell you in there from what time periods that from, if you're doing biblical archaeology. So, but the thing about carbon-14 though is like, it's like this banana. I put this in my backpack and look how it's deteriorating already. Carbon-14 is not around that long. It actually decomposes back into more stable carbon-12. For the next slide, it'll show you that coal has actually been in the ground for 200 million years. It does not have any access to our atmosphere. So you'll see it's buried in the ground, and this is pure 100% carbon-12. It has no carbon-14. And I know this is a little bit complicated, but this has helped me understand with climate change here. So for your next slide, you're going to see that one of the reasons scientists know that it's us is that the radioactive carbon-14 has really gone down while the carbon-12 has spiked up. And this has been graphed up. So this is the decrease by the radioactive carbon-14. So we know it's not any kind of modern source of carbon. We know it's an ancient source, really putting a lot of carbon-12 in our atmosphere. So if this was a crime show, I don't know if any of you guys watch crime shows, this would be the DNA evidence that it's carbon-12. This is how we know that it's us. If we were trying to prove this in court here, it's carbon-12, that type of carbon from an ancient source of coal, then we know that it's us in our atmosphere. And so this is how this, but there's all kinds of human fingerprints to show that it's us causing the carbon dioxide. One of the reasons we know is that the upper atmosphere is cooling there. That's how we know it's not the sun. Because if it was the sun, what would the sun heat up first? The most top part of our atmosphere. The atmosphere is actually cooling because the carbon dioxide, again, it's trapping it like a blanket. So what scientists are noticing then is less heat is actually escaping into space. And they actually see this on satellites. More heat is actually returning to the Earth. The scientists can also see the carbon, the fossil carbon fuel in the air. They can see the corals. So there's multiple lines of evidence. At Crater Lake also, we can see that the nights are warming faster than days. Winters are warming more than summer. So there's multiple lines of evidence that are pointing to it's us and not any kind of natural phenomenon. But, folks, I actually have the ultimate proof here today that climate change is caused by it. You guys ready for this here? You guys ready? The change in underwear fashions. Over the years, from what our grandparents wore to what the kids kind of wear today. But seriously though, I got a video to show you right now of one person in particular that's been impacted by climate change. What's really sad about that video is that, and there's been interviews with that gal on CNN, she lost her home, She lost her dog, so she was crying for days on end when she lost her dog. And literally she lost the clothes off her back. What climate change does is it makes the floods worse there, because what happens is that more water is evaporating off the ocean. So it makes the storms more intense, but it also makes the droughts more, because it makes warmer atmosphere causes more water to be sucked out of the ground. So like in California right now, that a drought is even worse. So again, it puts our weather on steroids. It doesn't cause it, it makes these things worse here today. And especially is bad for the elderly and the poor. These are impacted most, but the folks that necessarily can't afford air conditioning and the necessities that some of us have. And it especially impacts third world countries like Pakistan. There was actually a flood in 2010 that very much worried the Department of Defense, because there was actually, I believe, 20 million people that were impacted by a flood. And this is what keeps the Department of Defense and Homeland Security and the CIA up late at night. This is a nuclear-armed country that got further destabilized by a flood that was probably exacerbated by climate change. Next door in India in 2000, this is Pakistan in 2010. Next door in India in 2012, there was tens of millions of people that got impacted by floods, and hundreds that lost their life. Over 100 people lost their life in this too. Which brings up a good question for us here today. For those of us here, who is our neighbor here? That's a good question to ask for us to think about. Who's our neighbor here? Well, Romans 13:10 tells us that love does no harm to our neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So the Bible asks us to be, therefore, our neighbor, to love one another. But this is what's interesting. If you look at the historical emissions of carbon dioxide, the average American has a huge carbon footprint of 21. I think it's 21 pounds per person or tons per person. Over twice that of Japan and other parts of the world. And if you look at historical emissions, Russia I think comes in three here. At 27, maybe China number 2, and we are way at the top, like 2.5 times more than China with our total emissions that we have given off. So we've given off a lot of this carbon dioxide. On the other hand, on my next slide is going to show you the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change are these countries in red. Third world countries in Africa, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. These are the ones that are most vulnerable to climate change, the poorest countries in the world. And so on the next slide, we'll show you it's also impacting the U.S. economy and the world economy. 400,000 lives are lost globally each year by hurricanes that are more intense and also more floods and fires. $1.2 trillion is siphoned off the world economy with increased natural disasters too, being more intense. In the U.S., 20,000 lives are lost, scientists estimate. And the more we don't enact on this, we increase that price tag on our world economy that we might have to pay upwards of $500 billion. So climate change as it is already an impact on our economy. Climate change is an impact on our national security. When I came back home last October, this was kind of an eye-browsing article that I saw in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, that climate change will impact the U.S. military. The U.S. military did this report, and this report said that warns the Department of Defense that climate change could cause severe weather increases, food and electricity shortages, and cause instability in many countries, spreading disease, mass migration, and opening the door for extremists to take advantage of fractures in already unstable countries. And one example is in Syria. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. In Syria, they had a really bad drought from 2006 to 2010, turned 60% of their land into desert. By 2010, the drought had killed 80% of the country's cattle. As this farmer remarked, he had 400 acres of wheat. Now he has desert. And so you had millions of refugees, and a million people that had to flood their homes due to the drought. And so then there was this State Department cable that said the Syrian Minister of Agriculture said publicly that the economic and social fallout from the drought was beyond our capacity to deal with. So this is impacting parts of the countries of the world, and it certainly impacts our national security. It impacts us here in the Midwest. This is something that I'm worried about. So we've gone up since 1880 about 0.8 degrees Fahrenheit. And National Geographic put together a wonderful video about 10 years ago, it was about 10 years ago, called 6 Degrees That Could Change the World. And they talk about 1 degree rise in Celsius, which is about 2 degrees in Fahrenheit, could turn some of America's most productive farmland and ranchlands into deserts. And these prolonged droughts could cause shortages in the global grain and meat markets. Here, so it's not just Syria, but it's also impacting our food in the grocery store there. So in the next slide, you'll see how many of you guys are ready to panic here. I know I'm ready to panic with all this bad news. But are you guys ready for some solutions here today? Because I wanted to share some good news. I want to share some of the good things that we can do here today. And again, I thought about Romans as I put this together here today. Romans 14:12. That each of us will have to give an account of himself to God. All of us will be accountable for our actions in our lives here. And I want to bring this up because one of the first things I get in question and answer is that, we've done a lot of pollution here in the United States, but isn't China polluting more than we are? And that is a great question because now China is polluting more than we are. But it goes back to accountability. And keep this in mind here, folks, that China is now installing, since 2012, they now produce half of the world's solar panels. And they've been installing more than pretty much any country in the world except for Germany. So yes, they are polluting a lot, but they're really trying to switch as much as they can to renewable energy. This is worldwide solar installation. You can see the blue is kind of the US, and you can see all these other countries. China is just going through the roof as far as how much solar they're actually installing. China is now in the process of implementing cap and trade programs, of taxing carbon throughout their country there too. They're trying to limit this now too also. They actually, a couple of years ago too, they're pretty much starting to outlaw new coal-fired power plants, so they're starting to make the switch here. And actually last year they were flat as opposed to the year before, so that their coal increase is not really happening. They're starting to level off as far as how much coal they are actually buying. But the reason I want to bring this up is that you'll hear this excuse that we should not do anything about climate change until China does something. Or why should we do anything when China pollutes a lot? And it reminds me of one of my favorite stories about two brothers that were eating breakfast one morning. And the mom was making pancakes, and she was trying to make them as fast as she could because the boys were really, really hungry. And as she was making the pancakes, the one brother says, "I want the first pancakes." And the brother said, "I want the first pancakes. I want the first." They keep going back and forth. "I want the first pancakes." And finally the mother said, "If Jesus was here, he would say, 'Let my brother have the first pancakes.'" And the one brother turns to the other brother and says, "You be Jesus." And that's what kind of reminds me of what we're doing right now with China. We're saying, well, we're not going to do anything until China does something. But China is doing a lot right now. Yes, they are polluting, but we need to be leaders on this issue here. The president of China has actually said that green and sustainable development represents the trend of our times. Keep in mind, folks, in 2014, China actually spent $90 billion investing in renewable energy. We only spent about $54 billion. China wants to sell to us, and we have to ask ourselves, which would we rather have? Would we rather be selling our solar products to China, or China selling to us? I think we need to think much more in this game of renewable energy for our planet. I also had an interesting conversation with the education minister from China. He actually came to Crater Lake last June. I asked him that question that people want to know, because I get this a lot in presentations. I asked him, I said, okay, Americans want to know, we hear China pollutes a lot. What's your answer to that? He said, this is what he told me. He said, okay, you go, this is what we think in China. He said, you guys took a shower. You took a long shower. You took a great shower. Now you're telling us you can't take a shower, or you must take a very short shower, or not take a shower at all. We want to be able to take a shower too. And I thought that was an interesting analogy. They do want to live like us. We just have to help them live more sustainably, live more with renewable energy, not pollute as much. And we can, and there are American advisors over there helping them do that, to help create this market so that renewable is really, really the way to go. And China gets this, but let's have more partnerships with them and instead of saying that they are just strictly the problem. Because again, I think he brings up, and this is, I showed this before, but I want to read this again, the historical emissions. We need to be leaders on this issue because the historical emissions do come from the US. Again, Russia's third, if you look at all the historical emissions here. China's number 2, but we are actually number 1 in the historical. So leadership has to come from home on this issue. Keep in mind here too, folks, that you want to do this because actually green is green. It saves you money. I've been doing a presentation for years now called It's Easy to Be Green. And basically every October, Consumer Reports does issue on how to save money at home. And if you take their advice, I actually did this in a presentation from this issue of Consumer Reports. If you go through all their suggestions, adjusting your TV remote from the showroom model to the home model, it saved you $45. Paying a cooling expert to winterize, or actually to insulate your ducts and heating events. Unplugging your voltage vampires, such as your microwaves and TVs and things like that when you don't need them. Don't wash your dishes before you put them in the dishwasher. There's all kinds of things that they suggest. Here, insulating your attic and basement, plus changing at least 3 of your light bulbs from the old style to LEDs. You could save nearly $1,000 if you follow their tips in here. You could be saving a whole lot of money. What could you do with that $1,000? Come visit me at Crater Lake. But besides that, this is actually good news, because the good news that the Post-Dispatch reported on a couple of years ago is that carbon emissions in the U.S. actually declined from 2010 to 2012, and that 75% of that was because of energy efficiency. In transportation, people driving more fuel-efficient cars. Residential, people finding more ways to being more energy efficient at home, and also commercial. So energy efficiency does work and it saves you money. I like what energy expert Emery Lovin said about that. He said, quote, when people realize that you basically said, you don't have to believe in climate change to want to solve it. So you don't have to believe in climate change to want to solve it. Everything we do to raise energy efficiency will make money, improve security and health, and stabilize the climate. And back in the room, I should introduce him back there. Don Diekman, am I saying your name right, Don? He does energy efficiency audits in Alton, Illinois. He's only like a 10-15 minute drive from here. He helps the people build homes that are energy, how do you say it, Don?
Zero energy.
Zero energy. So he can help you save a bundle of money doing an energy audit, or if you want to build a new home, how can you do it without having to be on the grid there too. So green is actually green. It will save you money there. I also like what Avery Lovin said. He goes, once people understand that climate protection puts money back in your pocket, that you don't have to buy all that fuel, the political resistance will melt faster than the glaciers. But that's the key word, is political resistance, because I know in the Q&A people are going to say, oh, but our political leaders, they're not going to do anything about this. Well, I'm actually involved with a movement trying to do something about this. I also do a presentation. I'm kind of combining them all here today. I do one called The Conservative Case for a Carbon Tax, trying to reach out to our conservative brothers and sisters on this issue. Because actually conservative economists will tell you that we do need a carbon tax. Greg Mankiw was actually the economic advisor for President George W. Bush. And he said in the Wall Street Journal in 2006 that I will advocate a carbon tax as the best way to control global warming. Another one that supports a carbon tax who's come out is this gentleman. Who is this? George Will. He's probably on a Sunday morning talk show this morning. very conservative, but he also supports a carbon tax. George Shultz, who is Secretary of State for President Ronald Reagan. So there's lots of conservatives who come out in favor of a carbon tax. Why are they in favor of it? And that's because the way you get less pollution is to make pollution expensive. That's how one of the reasons we've been able to reduce smoking here in the United States. Up to 44% of our population smoked in 1965. Now we're down 19%. And that's because of cigarette taxes, as well as changing social values. What conservative economists will tell you is that we should tax what we burn, not what we earn. Who here likes income taxes? Nobody ever raised their hand during this part. Who here likes payroll taxes? Nobody ever raised their hand. Who here likes corporate taxes? Well, believe it or not, conservative economists hate them even more than you do because they think that it's a drag on our economy. So they said we should be taxing the things that cause us harm, such as pollution. They tell us we should be putting a price on carbon for our planet and also for our health here too. So basically a carbon tax works like this. You cut down on that pollution. And believe it or not, burning coal causes upwards of 13,000 deaths each year in the U.S. The Merrimack plant down by South County, I know causes between 57 to 100 deaths each year. We have cheap electricity here in St. Louis and Missouri, but we're not paying for the healthcare costs of burning coal, of burning fossil fuels. So the great thing about a carbon tax, if you do it correctly, what the way conservative economists want it, it actually puts more money back in your pockets and it actually helps clean the air. And so the group that I'm involved with, it's a nonpartisan group, conservatives, Republicans, liberals, all kinds of people are involved with this group. Their goal is to get Congress to pass a revenue-neutral carbon fee and dividend. And they're making good inroads, meeting with members of Congress about this. So their goal is to have a fee placed on carbon-based fuels at the source, the coal mine, the oil well, or at the U.S. border. It starts at $15 a ton of fossil fuel emitted. It rises each year by 10 years, so that within a decade, clean energy is then cheaper than fossil fuels. All the money collected is in return to American households, and this helps protect the poor and middle class. It's on an equal basis, 66% of American households would come out ahead. The dividend check would be greater than their increased cost of energy. And a predictably increasing carbon price will send a clear market signal, which will help unleash entrepreneurs to go all in to invest in a clean market economy. So this is our best free market solution for conservatives that are out there, trying to get our conservative brothers and sisters on board for this. And carbon taxes are successful. They have been road tested worldwide, and they are successful. British Columbia, our neighbor just north of Washington State, they've had one since 2008. While Canada has gone up in carbon emissions, British Columbia has gone down 20%. And by having this carbon tax, it's very popular in British Columbia, they've actually helped reduce payroll taxes, income taxes, and corporate taxes while reducing their carbon emissions. And so there's no economic case against a carbon tax. It helps. There was actually a study group called the REMI, Regional Economic Models Incorporated, that a revenue-neutral carbon tax can help create about 2.1 million jobs over 10 years, 2.8 over 20 million, or over 20 years. It helps reduce carbon dioxide emissions by a third over 10 years, by 50% over 20 years. It increases household incomes because as the fee goes up, your dividend check goes up. It saves lives because all of a sudden you're not having those 13,000 people die each year from coal pollution here in the U.S. It would save up to 230,000 lives over 20 years. And it's a big boost to the economy. To our GMP there, to up to $1.3 trillion to our GMP. So I've talked about here today, there's so many solutions that you can do. I talked about the individual solutions of energizing or using energy efficiency in your home. Also, on a societal level, so we have to do this in two different ways. There's individual levels, but we also have to kind of change as a society too on this issue. But also our churches need to get involved. That's why I'm so thrilled to be speaking to you guys here today, getting our churches involved on this issue. There's a wonderful group here in St. Louis and nationwide called Interfaith Power and Light. And Larry, isn't Tracy Koch speaking on them next week?
Yes,
or May 17th, and she's actually from Interfaith Power. So this is different churches speaking out and taking actions on climate change, different denominations working together on this issue. The Pope is going to have a big encyclical this year for Catholics. The Pope has basically come out and said that whoever destroys creation, God will destroy those who destroys creation. He quotes Revelations on this. The U.S. Council of Bishops that says climate change as a core is about it's not an economic theory or political platform. It's not a partisan advantage or an interest group. It's about the future of God's creation and our human family. So, here's actually a priest actually blessing, putting some holy water on some solar panels. And I think if you're really, really nice to Pastor John, if you install some solar panels, he might be up for blessing your solar panels. Would you do that for folks here also, Pastor John? So the Catholic Church is going full board on this. They plan on being the first country in the world that's going to be totally 100% renewable energy. And they're going to do it because they say God's on their side as far as being totally 100% renewable energy. But I love what really inspired me recently. This is Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. She's an evangelical Christian. She's also a climate scientist at Texas Tech University. She said climate change is an opportunity to express our faith through love. Isn't that beautiful? Since it does impact people in the poorest of the poor in the world. This is a way to reduce our pollution and make this a healthier planet. And for me in particular as a park ranger, it means healthier national parks. It means protecting God's natural creation too. So when I go there and visit there, our national parks continue to be beautiful places. And also, if we do this, we protect for future generations there also. So this is such a thrill to speak to you guys. I know I spoke for a very long time, but I will be around as long as it takes if you guys have any questions for me here today. But you guys have been a wonderful group here. Any questions or thoughts?
Brian,
Pastor John.
You mentioned Catherine Hayhoe, and I had a chance to at least look at part of the clip that she speaks on. And one of the things that I thought was very striking about what she said is that so often when we hear about climate change, it is framed in the language of religion or doctrine, in the sense that people will say, well, do you believe in climate change? Sort of like, do you believe in the law of gravity? And she said one of the things that is unnecessarily kind of confusing and misleading and so forth is that we get away from the idea of, well, this is science that has given us observation and results that we can then take and learn from and use in the way that we live, much as we view scientific discovery in the past. But that for some reason, that climate change has the aura of a religion about it, and sometimes it is even put in, as we were talking earlier, about in opposition somehow to our faith, that somehow this is a threat to our faith. So I don't know if you could comment on that.
Yeah, that's an extra point there, Pastor John, because Catherine Hayhoe is a climate scientist, and believe it or not, there's a huge percentage. She actually gave the same talk that Pastor John was talking about. There's a huge percentage of climate scientists that regularly go to church on Sunday. So this is not something of atheist scientists versus believers. There's a lot of Christians that are in academia who accept climate scientists, and they're actually scratch their head about this. Catherine Hayhoe believes that scientists kind of shows us exactly how God works in the world. They're not polar opposites. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has a beautiful quote about that too. I could read you or share with you guys about that there also. So science shows us how kind of the God works in the world, and it's a matter of using them. She talks a lot about using our minds that God gives us to try to do our best to solve this problem. You're also, I don't know if that answers what you're talking about, but she does a much better job than I've watched that several times. I need to keep watching it because that is a great program to watch. How to reach out to Christians about that, and why some Christians aren't accepting this. Other thoughts that you guys have, because you can tell I love talking about this.
You know what I find frustrating, and I work with a couple people that are like this, it's like people who don't believe in climate change, they don't want to learn anything. I had one guy, he got into this discussion about climate change, and he actually looked at me and he said, I thought you were smarter than that.
Oh, wow.
I can't believe you believe that. And I finally had to just, I've worked with the guy for years, I really like him.
Yeah.
But I thought, ooh, this is not an argument I want to get in at work. But it was so strange. He's a very intelligent guy, but it's like there's this wall that they don't even want to learn anything about this to make an educated decision whether they go along with this or not. He said, I don't even think there's climate change happening. I'm thinking, where do you start with that?
I know Larry wants to respond to this here.
I'm presenting next week, but then the week after that, May 17th, we actually have a workshop on how to talk about climate change with people who aren't necessarily on board, who would like to co-work, I can't remember what co-worker said.
Yeah.
So come on May 17th, we have a half hour on that. I won't say it's going to solve all problems, but at least avoid confrontation and hopefully open some minds.
Well, one of the reasons I've been coming to these is to try to educate myself to even have a comeback. Say, explain to me why there's climate change.
Yeah. Well, one thing you learn when you've been involved in this stuff for a long time is it's not necessarily facts. That don't really matter that much. It's framing, it's emotion, it's a lot of other things, and getting the right people.
Yeah. One of the things I heard this week is it's stories. And so if you can, well, first of all, keep in mind that there's some people that if you give them facts, it's kind of like feeding a baby that doesn't want to eat. Not to call them a baby, but it's bringing a horse to water. But so there's certain people, if you give them facts, they're going to cling even more to their belief that they don't believe in that. And so what Catherine Hale suggests is tell your story. Say, hey, I was in this national park, I was in nature, or hey, that heat wave in 2012, this is what it did to my garden. Talk about some story, how it relates to you. And then for some people you can't bring up, unfortunately, you can't bring up climate change because it is emotionally charged, but you can say, hey, I just read this article in Consumer Reports about, man, all the money you can save with energy efficiency. You can bring it on board, because actually a lot of folks who don't accept climate change, they're very on board with energy efficiency. So, saving money. So some cases, it's how you witness your faith, in a sense. So some of the folks, I don't believe in climate change. Okay, well, hey, here's a great tips on saving energy in your house that they might be in favor of too. So there's different segments of the population. There's a whole thing called, and this would be a whole other thing to talk about, there's what's called the 6 Americas. There's people that are alarmed, like Larry, myself, and folks in this room. There's other people who are concerned. They just don't know what to do. There's people that are cautious. They think it's happening, but don't know what's happening. There's people who are disengaged. They don't know much about it. But then you have the other extreme of the doubtful and the dismissive. And for those folks, if you try to tell them, well, the weather is changing and this, they're going to cling even more to their beliefs. So try to find that common ground with them, of, with stories. Oh man, wasn't that heat wave in 2012 really bad? Or, hey, I just saw this tip where I can save money. Maybe you might be interested in that too. So maybe try it that way. The more we try to turn it into a contentious issue, the more they're going to accept that it's not real. If that helps out. Question?
Well, comment and a question. Since you brought up Anne Frank in the beginning, I don't know if many people know this, that in her diary she made mention of a tree outside of her window, and they've taken cuttings from that tree and planted them all over the world. Wow. Which I thought was just amazing.
That is.
But in that same frame of mind, as they're tearing down the rainforests, are they planting trees in its place?
Well, I've heard a couple different things about that, and Larry and anybody else wants to jump in too. I've heard the worst country right now in the world as far as deforestation is actually Indonesia. Jakarta, a place like that, the smoke is actually terrible. And what they're doing is they're chopping those trees down and they're creating palm oil. We have a lot of palm oil in our foods now, and that comes from places like Indonesia. And that's not nearly as a productive forest as the rainforest. The problem with rain when you cut down rainforest is a lot of that carbon is in the soil. So they burn the trees, they burn the soil, and a lot of that, 20% of the carbon now is coming from deforestation worldwide. I've heard one report that one of the best countries at trying to combat deforestation is now actually Brazil. And maybe they're not doing great about this, but they're still doing better than countries like Indonesia and some of the countries in Africa. there too. Larry, anybody else have any thoughts about this?
Well, I just assumed,
Yeah.
and even in this country, as they cut down trees, I just assumed they planted trees in its place, but it's not true.
Well, and that's a complicated one, because I spend my summers in Oregon, and that's the raging debate in Oregon, about, because there is still a lot of logging in Oregon, and I'm not opposed to logging, because obviously I print stuff, in paper, but you got to do it in a sustainable way of doing it there too. So you've got to do it in a way that you don't, the clear cutting is really terrible for the planet, and that you clear cut it and burn it down. We've got to have laws against that nationally and globally from doing the clear cutting. Doing more sustainable harvesting is what we should be doing. I don't know if that really exactly answers what you're talking about, but I know that's kind of so I'm a little bit rusty about when I go back to Oregon, boy, that's always the big debate about how much logging should we be doing there.
And one thing I also know is that older trees absorb 3,000 times more carbon than young trees, right? Because it's almost larger, and it's only more leaves and all that, so you need to really plant like 100 trees to replace their old growth tree that you cut down. So yes, we need to do reforestation and replanting, but it does not replace the need to cut carbon fast.
Question?
Before I retired, I worked down near the St. Louis rail yards, and you cannot believe how many coal cars are dragged in from the western coal fields every week. I mean, hundreds of cars every day are dragged in, most of them for power plants. And it's just amazing to see that much coal brought into St. Louis.
It is. There was actually something on the Discovery Channel. It's like the largest networking transportation system in the world, all the coal trains in the U.S. here. So yeah, if in South County I see a lot of that going to the Merrimack plant. But there is actually some good news in that coal keeps going down in the U.S. because a lot of these coal plants now are 60 years old. And, they're as old as baby boomers, and they're getting ready to retire. And a lot of these coal plants need to be retired. So we are going down in coal uses. 2 years ago, I got really involved with trying to retire the Merrimack plant. And last year, Ameren actually made the announcement that they're going to retire that plant next year and convert it into natural gas, which is going to give off a lot less carbon dioxide. And that plant's actually going to be retired by the year 2022. So yeah, we're still transporting a lot of coal. The other side of this too is that in Missouri, we import in, I think the cost of over $1 billion each year in coal. That's money that leaves our state. And so when we invest in wind and solar and energy efficiency, that money stays here. I love the analogy. When you weatherize your home, you're not going to ship your home to China to have your home weatherized, are you? Because you need your home. You're going to hire a local contractor to do that. So these jobs in energy efficiency, solar, wind, they stay in Missouri and they create jobs here for folks that are here. Other questions? Because as you guys can tell, I love to talk. I probably talk way too long, but any other questions that you guys had? Any other thoughts here? And I hope you will come to Larry. I'm going to do my best to be here for Larry's talk next week here too. Or Pastor John, anybody else have any other closing thoughts here? Well, I really appreciate your time, and again, I'll be around as long as it takes if you have any questions, but I really appreciate it. I've had so much fun coming to your church for the last 3 weeks, and hopefully I'll be able to attend next week here too. But thanks so much for coming here today.